the number of opportunities social media has opened up for me, be it in healthcare policy, in the practice of medicine, in developing relationships and entrepreneurial ideas and things like that, and pushing those forward has been unique. And so for me, it's been a hugely positive and impactful thing of I may not agree with everybody. We may have different viewpoints, but if you're positive and you kind of work towards the thing, and you can interact with people and learn a lot from them. And then also, you can kind of start to collaborate with them. The actual curse word, just because
Yes.
it's for no other reason that just because of the environment I've been in for the number of years. So.
I love that. So listen, I wanted to have you on.
Mhm.
Number one, we started this little podcast and we started the Doctor's Lounge kind of together, but I did it largely because I don't know, I've been in this business since 97 and I just kept thinking like, I have all these friends, like I go around the country, I'm in practices every day. And you know what? No one knows the voice of the private practice doc. Like no one hears from you guys. So, I've been trying to interview all of my new friends, if you will, on X. And you are just one of the accounts that I love. I think you're always vulnerable. I think you're always authentic. And you're like, hey, listen, I get that you may not agree with this position, but I'm just going to tell you what I think. And then we could have you're one of the few that's like, let's have a conversation about it. Now, I know people say really crazy stuff, but I love and admire that you're always kind of open to it. So what made you do it? And tell us a little bit about who you are.
What made me go on X, or what made me go into private
What
practice?
made you go on social media? Like, why did you, that's a brave deal.
So I left I was very academic, and I left an established hospital employed position, which was well thought of in around 2018. And it was kind of an ugly breakup, and it was over finances. And then part of what happened was I realized that I didn't have a voice and I didn't have a place to talk to people or tell people where I went. And so I became very protective of my name. And I also learned that I could use social media, whether it's X or LinkedIn or any other thing, to let people know where I am. And then I also realized that people like to listen to what our concerns are and our issues are. So that's where all that stemmed from. But it's been one of those things where for me, it's been nothing but positive in the sense that, there's the pros and cons of, the messiness of social media and interacting with large groups in kind of an anonymous way. But in terms of just, I've never encountered so many people, and I've never encountered so many like-minded people. Sometimes I felt like when I was employed that I was maybe an outlier. And then I realized that I'm really not. I'm part of a much larger group of people who have legitimate concerns about the way healthcare is run, legitimate concerns about the direction healthcare is taking in the United States. So it made me much more confident about those concerns, which, if you're in an academic position or in an employed position, sometimes your views are, if they don't fall in line with the views of the aggregate, then you're seen as an outsider.
What are some of the big topics that either you did know or didn't know about, but that they're crucial for the independent practice of medicine? What are the things when you look at your social media, you go, these are the things that I really want to get across to people, and these are the things I want to talk about?
For me, that's easy, right? Like, so if you're young and you want to go into private practice, right, or an independent practice, protect your name, right? Protect your entity, protect your name. Don't let it get sunk into an employed practice, or even if you're in an employed practice and you're considering leaving, your name is the only way people will recognize you. So making sure you protect that. The other thing I've learned is the financials aren't that hard, right? Like despite what everybody will tell you, most doctors can add well. Spend the time to learn it, and it's not the most complicated thing in the world. Don't let people overcomplicate it, but that's one of those things where people make it much harder than it needs to be. And the third part of it is basically consolidation is bad, right? Be it government consolidation or corporate consolidation, all of that is bad. So for me, the autonomy of being in private practice, it's a dynamic thing, and it changes the way you look at larger groups and the way groups run. So, I think, a lot of that comes from making mistakes and then trying to be convinced that I need to join a bigger group or do this or that. And what I've learned over time is as I've gotten better at managing my own practices and managing my own affairs, I'm less inclined to want to join a big group and be forced into something that I'm not comfortable with.
What you've now said protect your name a couple of times. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like I've never heard that phrase. I'd love to know what it means.
Well, I think like, if you're employed by a group, right? And let's say like a large hospital system in the area, a lot of the times they will restrict your abilities or what you're allowed to or not allowed to say online, right? Or restrict what you have, right? And they will control it to a degree where even when you're leaving, it can create a headache for you. So by protecting isn't necessarily meaning like don't say anything that's controversial, but don't let anybody else own your name, right? So don't let the children's hospital down the street or the large university own your accounts, own your names, own your anything that all the social media presence, the presence that you have, because as soon as you do, then getting it back becomes really hard. And then the voice will also will change. So it may not be an authentic voice anymore. So for me, right, I'm very much about like making sure that my social media stuff, my thing is genuinely me, as opposed to letting, the university put up something that or the hospital system that I'm happening to be operating in today, put up something that I is not that I don't have direct control over.
Do you
I'm a
think
control freak.
well, I think we all ought to have agency over our lives, right? We ought to be in control. What are you've just done so well. I've seen a lot of physicians come and go on social media. You and a couple of others have been very impactful. What was it that led you to say, I'm going to get on social media? And then what, I guess I'm trying to think about like, what have you learned by being on it? Yeah, you learned that, yeah, there's more people like you, but are there some policy things that this is really kind of where I kind of was leading. This is what was in my head. And now I really see clearly like, we ought to have hospitals or, PE shouldn't be in ASCs. I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to kind of get that from you.
So again, I mean, that's where I think for me, the things is I'm kind of a dum dum. So in a simple way, I realize that I'm not, healthcare policy isn't something that I don't understand, or it's not meant to be behind closed doors. And so
Hmm.
one of the things I uh, liked most about kind of being on social media was the fact that I can engage and speak to people who have a real influence and start to maybe put things out there that can show my view. So a lot of it has to do with, and I learned so much. So a lot of it also becomes is like I thought I understood something. I thought I understood how ASCs run or how physician owned hospitals are banned or how there are avenues even in the newer healthcare environment where we can take advantage of certain things. Some of those things I did not know and I wasn't exposed to until social media. And then the other thing is like it's the connections, right? Like it's all about connections, right? So if I'm holed up in my practice and I don't look outside of it, I'm never going to meet anybody and I'm never going to see any opportunities. So it's kind of, you know, you're in Arizona or where are you, Desh?
Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in Arizona. I'm in Florida. How do we interact, right? How do we get to the
Right.
point where we are, right? So for me, look, the number of opportunities social media has opened up for me, be it in healthcare policy, in the practice of medicine, in developing relationships and entrepreneurial ideas and things like that, and pushing those forward has been unique. And so for me, it's been a hugely positive and impactful thing of I may not agree with everybody, we may have different viewpoints, but if you're positive and you kind of work towards the thing, and you can interact with people and learn a lot from them, and then also you can kind of start to collaborate with them. And then I can tell you the number of papers, the number of research ideas that have come from it, the number of entrepreneurial ideas. Like I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on now that directly stemmed from it. So it's one of those things for me.
That's
It's
cool.
yeah, it's one of those things where I'm excited about it, and that's why I participate the way I do. I think some of it right now is it can become a little overwhelming, so you can get too into the weeds. And so over the last couple of months, because of some outside stuff, I've pulled back a little bit. Again, I have value of it for me in terms of just learning wise is incredible.
Yeah. What are the things that you would say to we talk to young docs all the time, right? That are going to leave and get ready to either go work in the health system or join a private practice or an independent practice. What do you like? What advice do you have for them? What do you say to them when you meet with these young guys? Because there's a bunch of them down in South Florida. And I don't mean guys, I'm not excluding any women here. What does your heart tell them? Like, what do you say to them? Like, hey, look, I love you. I'm so glad you're in this beautiful practice. This is a wonderful profession. What do you say?
Well, it depends, right? Like, so if they're looking to uh, be employed, then I've given them a couple of talks on managing kind of that setting is like, hey, if you're employed, these are the things your contract needs to have to protect yourself. I am very much nuts and bolts on those things. So I say, like, this is what you needs to have. This is what you have to have. This is how your intellectual property. You need to protect your intellectual property aspect of the contract. You need to protect the non-compete portion of it. You need to have this wording in here. Make sure you don't, these things are poison pills, right? Having that very thing and making sure that the employed physician understands that, look, too often large entities will say, well, you can't, we don't let you negotiate your contract,
Yeah.
right? This is what you get. You can negotiate everything.
You can
And
negotiate
if
everything.
Right,
Yes.
everything. And if you're gonna sit there and take a job because and just succumb to the fact that you're not gonna negotiate from day one because somebody told you, right? You're already screwing yourself for your second contract and your third contract. So here's my thing. This is like, you know what? Like, you may think you want to be there, but if the administrator or the person who may be very nice says you can't negotiate something, I would be very, very concerned. And the other thing is it's never about administrator the first, right? It's always about administrator the second, administrator the third, right? Administrator the first may be a perfectly nice, honest person who has your best intentions in mind, but you and I know the turnover of those positions is so high that you're going to get yourself into a position where you're going to have administrator the third who just doesn't like your haircut, and then you're in a bad spot. For private practice guys, it's the same, but the focus needs to be more on, like, look, understanding that you're going to go out there and you have to be self-sufficient, right? Like you got to do the small things to put yourself in a position to be successful, and don't let people talk you out of, like, business isn't hard, right? Like, I know, like, business, like the concepts around it, like the understanding how a dollar works, how a dollar moves isn't hard, right? Don't let people make it harder than it needs to be, right? It's about your work. It's about your work ethic. It's about putting the time into understanding the concepts and then making sure that you have good people around you to kind of follow through on those things. It's like, no, you can't run every financial thing on your own because you're just going to run yourself into the ground, but you should have a core understanding of it. But then you have to build a team around you that you trust that can follow through on what your vision is. And so it's very much you're going to spend the next 6 months, year and a half going through another residency to learn all these ideas. You need to start that right away.
I love that you said that. So you think it's about a year, maybe 18 months. Is that about how long it took you to kind of prepare yourself? Like, hey,
Mhm.
these are the nuts and bolts. These are all the things I need. This is how
Yeah,
it's going to work.
100%. Yep, and I spent so much extra money on like misplaced consulting and things like that, and like certain things, right? Like certain things are necessary, but then a lot of people come to you, and then you realize after the fact, after you spent the 10 or 15,000 on it, that wasn't necessarily a good financial investment, and so you start to learn some of that. But that's where, especially nowadays, because more and more of that is available online. And then more and more of people like you or me or other people who understand the space where people can always reach out to us is available. So a lot of and you probably have this as well, but people reach out to me surgeons reach out to me quite a bit and ask me questions, and I try to go out of my way to make sure that I answer them as honestly as I can, and about the pros and cons and kind of things like that. And so using the resources that you have, is important.
Until I had my first kiddo, well, I mean, my wife had, but you know what I mean. I spent every Saturday morning, 5 a.m. New York time to about 10 a.m. talking. It was always free. Now, there were Saturdays that maybe I only had one or two, but I always left those open. I got that early on from some docs I loved that really kind of shaped my how I do business. And I always help the young guys. There are a bunch of them were in fellowship, mostly kind of spine guys. And they would call and like, hey, I'm finishing up my fellowship. I really want to go into private practice. What do I do? And they're like, I can pay a guy or I could call you. And I'm like, well, how about we just talk through the big stuff and then just spend an hour or two on the phone and we'll just chat. And those guys are my lifelong friends. Right? We've been in touch forever. Is consulting good or bad? I'm sure you had some good ones, but then you have some not so great ones. This is why I like social media. I mean, I got on it really 5 years ago maybe six to really just kind of get into this stuff. Like, where could you get surface level but deeper information? And then where could someone inspire me to ask more questions where I could do the research? Like maybe I didn't know what questions to ask. Like
Yeah, and
what are the
I
top five
yeah.
things you ask when you start a private practice? Well, people don't know.
Right. Well, one of the issues I have, like, it's not consulting is good or bad. Sometimes I didn't know how to utilize it, right? Like, so
Right.
that's kind of a skill on its own, right? And that's where you can
That's an excellent
kind of
point,
get
by the way.
hosed,
That's an
right?
excellent point.
So I've used it in ways where like, I go in and like, hey, I'm young at this. I don't know. I'm learning this. Can you help me? And some people do, some people like, hey, but like what I've learned is like consulting is somebody who has information, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't question them on it. And so a lot of times what will happen with me early on was where like I got a and this is kind of specifically generated from the group that I had looked into help me start the private practice. It was very cookie cutter. And then when I would ask the questions, I never got a great kind of like if it fell outside of the cookie cutter formula, then I would get a lot of like, I don't know, or some pushback. So what I found is where the consulting and some of those things are most helpful for is when there is an exchange. And then you, by the end of that engagement, are as versed in that topic. Because I look at it as an educational thing, almost as versed at the topic as the person who you are working with, right? And so for me, it was like even with like contract law, right? Like I always have an attorney review a contract, right? But over the years, I can tell you I have a very, very solid understanding of contract law because I took the time to say, look, you know what? I need to be an expert on this, right? Because I can get screwed otherwise. And so like consulting isn't just deferring responsibility to somebody. At least that was the mistake I made early on. It's a kind of a taking the opportunity to learn everything, and then so as you move forward, you're better situated to handle the
Yeah.
complexities that you run into.
What I admire about it is I don't think curiosity is meant to just be deployed in medicine. I think curiosity is meant to be deployed in your whole life.
Exactly.
I mean, I am not by any natural talents. I have zero desire to read a bunch of legal documents. None whatsoever. Like they're not fun to read. I don't want to do it. The guys that work with me go, at least the ones that have been with me a couple of decades, they go, Dutch hates that. But you know what I do at 10 or 11 o'clock at night? Like I'm reading them because you have to. You don't like if you want to be in this business, right? You got to solve problems. And some of the problems are less fun to solve than others. It sounds like you're loving the independent practice of medicine. Why did you
Yes.
decide, like, are you from South Florida? Like, what made you decide to stay in South Florida? Like, what was it about that part of the world that you were like, okay, this is kind of home base. This is where I'm going to be.
I'm from California. I have very few ties to South Florida. Um, and what happened was I was training in Philadelphia. I was in a very academic position, and I was about to be deployed. And right prior to my deployment, this was back in 2009. Somebody named Harry Schuffelbarger, who is a very established name and well thought of name in the spinal deformity scoliosis world, asked me to come down. Um, and so I decided to come down and we were partners from 2010 to 2018, but we fell in love with South Florida. And then why have we stayed is my family. My kids love it. Like
Yeah.
my kids live on the water. We live right next to the water. My kids are grew up on it. Our lifestyle is very unique. And I don't think I could change that, or I would have trouble with that anywhere else. So that's
Yep.
probably what it is.
I went down to 30A for the first time I took the kids. Now we've been to Port St. Lucie a couple times, which I loved. We've been down to West Palm. I mean, what's there not to enjoy? I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, well, this is pretty nice. We've been to Naples, but we took the kids to 38. Mine are really little; they're babies, and they were like, just I'd never seen them that happy. My wife, like you, is from California, and so I've taken them to. I mean, they've spent a bunch. I mean, it's 5 hours. You get in the car, and you're there. So we spent a lot of time there. But I fell in love with Florida. Now I didn't fall in love with the humidity, but whatever. I mean, no place is perfect, so you can't beat it. Okay, so if doctors like you probably don't know, but you have a tremendous amount of courage to be on social media. I'm like I want more. I feel like it took me a long time to establish a voice on X. Physicians, I tell them you have a unique advantage. You have
Yeah.
either DO or MD behind your name, and even X, the product manager guy acknowledges if you have that professional bit behind your name, you get more influence. So how do you think it's beneficial for more docs to be on and to voice their concerns and voice their opinion? Because I feel like this is kind of like where the national conversation's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, because otherwise you get isolated, right? So we don't have as a large enough, we tend to work in silos, right? And
Yeah.
so the problem becomes is when you work in silos, you tend to lose your voice. And so my silo is my silo, and I'm very protective of my silo, but I don't know what's going on in the person's silo next to me. And so I think X or any social media, but specifically X, because of the way you can quickly respond and get in thing is critical for docs to be involved. I think the one like there's also a lot of pitfalls. So one of my concerns always becomes with the anonymity aspect of it. Right. Right. I think doctors are more impactful when they are honest about who they are. Right. But the problem becomes is then you also have a potential target on your back. So a lot of those anxieties and concerns keeps doctors silent or kind of lurking in the background. But we need everyone to voice their opinions more, because a lot of the shortcomings we have, a lot of the issues we have in medicine, um, are being drowned out by louder voices, and more who haven't been involved with it. I mean, like I think you had that wonderful response to the uh, healthcare economist from University of Michigan, or no, he's just
Mm,
the
yep.
economist from University of I mean, like a lot of these people have a very limited insight. Like whatever your political leanings are, right? People outside of medicine don't quite understand, whether they're conservative doctors, there's liberal doctors, everybody, everywhere in between. The people outside of medicine don't understand a lot of time the nuts and bolts of medicines and the issues you run into. So I think it's important for us to voice those, and to do so in a way where we do it as an aggregate, and then also that we do it individually, because I think it matters, and I think it helps the people next to you. And so the more I learn about it, the more I hear from you or everyone else. I think I get a much broader spectrum, and you're not, again, you're not, you don't have blinders on, and you get a wider
Mm,
view of the world. And right now, the problem becomes is employed, and this is a good example of this. I was at a meeting in Arizona like 2 weeks ago. The vast majority of those doctors were employed, and their view of healthcare was really, really narrow and defined by them being employed. So to the point where, the pushback I would get over basic ideas for concepts that they weren't aware of or introduced to, because they've been in an employed position so long that they don't see the opportunities that exist outside of that employed position. Because as an employed position, a lot of times in healthcare, you're essentially, other than certain runways, you're excluded from a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So having that conversation with them is like, no, you can do these things, and this is why, and this is how your contract prevents you from doing it. But if you didn't have that in your contract, you'd be 100% allowed to do that. And so it's just one of those things where it's just completely, it's a weird dynamic. So I think more of us that are on there, the better it is, not only for us to learn and teach, but also for the average person to see.
Yeah. We couldn't have ended on a better note. Like, that's the message, right? I mean, there's no ego involved here. It's like, well, did you know I wanted to build a radiology center? And here are the things that I encountered when I went to do it. I want to share that with you. And then, oh, this just happens to also happen in 35 other states. Do we think that has an impact on premiums? I'm not saying it does, but does it? That's my question. And the American people don't know, right? And it's like, okay, well, let's just talk about how that works. I mean, it's just like, I just want to have the conversation. And really, I think you've done a better job than probably anybody else, I think, is you've said these are not Republican or Democrat issues. This is just a human being issue. Like, hey, here's how a health system works from a university. Here's how a private practice works. I'm not throwing shade on anybody. I'm just saying, here's what it is. If you're wondering why your premiums are high, here you go. Here's the information. And the policy folks, yeah, I have a hard time with them. I don't know if you do, but I have a hard time because I think they're like, I lived in San Francisco for 4 years, and they are like my tech buddies in San Francisco who wanted to work on healthcare startups, and they'd get $7, $8, $10 million. And I'd be like, well, did you call the doctor that I sent you? Oh, no, I don't need him. And I go, you're building a healthcare delivery app. You got $9 million from this fund of ours, and you haven't called a doctor. You haven't called a nurse. You need a triage nurse on this deal. You haven't called. They're like, oh, I don't need that. That's how the policy guys are. The healthcare policy people are insurance talkers. I'm
Right.
like, you guys don't know anything about medicine. You're just
Well,
insurance
that's, I
people.
mean, so my take on that is like their opinions fit where the dollars come from, where their salaries
Oh,
come
for
from.
sure.
So, you
Yeah.
know, healthcare policies are in many guys are many ways like attorneys, right? Like, so if they are hired by, United, they're going to have a very United centric healthcare policy, right? If they're hired by, you know, the federal government, they're going to have a very federal government, centric policy. And I think that's inherent in that position. So there's very little diversity of thought in those systems because of the nature of how they're reimbursed, right?
Yep.